Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatoria. So what I have here is an axe made by Peter Szabo of Slovakia, and I've actually done a review of this before, which probably a lot of you have watched, but I decided to redo the review after talking a bit more with Peter based on some information he told me. So some things I mentioned in the previous video weren't necessarily accurate, so I decided to do a new one. I hope it's of use and interest to some of you. So first up, the axe itself. I'll just give you a little look. So we have a nice wooden shaft there. I think it's beech or something like that. I'm actually not sure of what wood it is. And the head of the axe, we've got a sheath protecting the edge. It is a sharp axe, and I will dispense with the sheath. Nicely made leather sheath with rivets. Obviously not historical to a Viking period axe, as this is sort of replicating. But nevertheless, it's a good way of protecting the sharp edge and protecting other people and things from the sharp edge. So, as mentioned, it is a sharp Viking period bearded axe, and this is a style of axe, as I mentioned in my previous review, that I essentially found a picture of an archaeologically found example, probably from the 10th or 11th century, that I wanted replicated, and he's done a good job of that. The heads of Peter Szabo's axes are made of an unspecified carbon, probably spring steel, from truck axles in Slovakia. So in actual fact it's a, should we say it's an unknown carbon steel, but nevertheless the result seems to be good. It came pretty damn sharp. I sharpened it up myself, or sort of finely tuned the edge, shall we say, and it certainly takes a very, very good edge and keeps a good edge. I have used this for test cutting and chopping a few things. I could chop wood with it. I haven't chopped wood with it, but it's certainly a very sturdy thing. Now, first up, the total weight of this is a kilogram, pretty much spot on. That's including the weight of the shaft, which means it's just over 2 pounds. In terms of the weight of the thing, this makes it a fairly nimble and quick axe. I could quite happily use with a shield, or indeed by itself, assuming you're used to handling a mace or an axe or a weapon of this nature, which has the weight at the top end of the shaft of around 2 pounds or 1 kilogram. So it's nice, it handles well. He seems to make decently proportioned and shaped axes, and this is really what drew me to asking him to replicate this style of axe head, was he seems to have, Peter has a really good eye for making axes, and he does in fact make pattern welded knives and swords and other things as well, but he, at least on Facebook, on his Facebook page, which is linked below here, he has lots of axes, and axes he seems to have specialised a bit in, at least up until now, although I noticed he's starting to do some pattern welded knives just recently as well. As for the kind of surface finish of the axe, it's left essentially as a forge finish, and I should say it is obviously quench hardened, but it's partially hardened, I believe, or I'm not sure if it's differentially hardened or partially hardened, but you could ask Peter about that, and I'm sure he could do any kind of hardening that you wanted him to. And it's got a fairly rough forge finish, which I'm absolutely fine with. I think most axes in the medieval period probably had that kind of finish. Most axes wouldn't have been polished. However, he can do a polished surface if you want. He can do decorated surfaces, and in fact one of the things he's become known for is doing amazing kind of intertwined writhing beasts and these kind of, you know, Scandinavian and perhaps even Anglo-Saxon style decoration actually forged into the surface of the steel, and I'm sure he could do inlay work as well if you wanted him to do that. So very skilled craftsman. In terms of the shaft, on previous videos of mine where I've talked about axes, people have made notes about the grain of the shaft, and that is something that is a bit odd on this shaft. I don't know how well you'll be able to see in this lighting, but the grain actually lies in that direction, towards you, which is kind of weird. It's at 45 degrees, it is neither in the plane of the flat nor the edge, but it's at 45 degrees to it. Seems like a strange choice to me, but there you go, that's what he's done. In terms of the shafts, he obviously can do any type of shaft that you want on an axe. This shaft is of moderate one-handed length. I haven't actually measured this, but looking at it, I guess it's about 26 inches, something like that. So about, what's that? It's about 30 centimetres there. So we're looking at about 45 centimetres, something like that. And so this is a pretty good length for if you're fighting with a shield. A pretty realistic length for what this type of axe probably was shafted with. In terms of the shaft though, one thing I really don't like about it is cylindrical. I did ask Peter, when I initially commissioned him to make an axe for me, I did ask him about doing an oval shaft, and he said that he does cylindrical sockets, and we left it at that. I would much prefer if this was an oval shaft, or even a rectangular shaft would be better. Although rectangular shafts are probably not historical to the sort of Viking era, as any regular viewers of mine will know, whether it's swords or axes or halberds, or with the exception of spears because they're thrust only most of the time, but any kind of weapon that has a cutting or a direction, an edge alignment to it, essentially. In other words, it has an edge or a hammer or a spike. I really want to be able to feel that in my hand, and my biggest criticism really of this is that it's a completely cylindrical shaft. And I know a couple of other people who've had axes from Peter as well, and they have the same issue. Now, what Peter says in response to that is completely fair in a sense, in that he does put or he can put studs or nails or other things into the shaft so that you can feel the edge alignment. Personally, I don't really think that cuts the mustard. Yes, that is, if you have a round shaft, you could put studs into it so that you could feel the alignment of the edge. However, I don't want studs in the shaft of my axe. They're going to cause blisters, friction that you don't want, and frankly I don't think it's a very efficient way of telling edge alignment. I think it's far better if you have a shaft that's round, rather than hammering anything into it to assist with edge alignment, just sand the flats down so that you now have an oval shaft. It's no problem having a round socket or round hole for the socket. If try and get the light on, there we go, you can see the end of the shaft is round there. It's no problem having a round socket and then as it comes out changing to another section, whether it be octagonal, square, oval, whatever. So I personally would highly recommend anybody getting axes from Peter to say, please make a flatter handle instead of a cylindrical handle. It doesn't make any sense to me having a cylindrical handle at all. And in fact this has a problem. Yes, if you grip it, if you get your edge alignment right, use your eyes and grip it tightly, then you can keep the edge aligned as you pass through the target. And I have used this for test cutting various things successfully. However, in the heat of battle, if you're using a shield and you don't have time to get your edge exactly aligned visually, you want to be able to just feel it. You want to be able to grab the weapon from wherever it is and smack, hit your edge straight into what you want to hit the edge with. If you're very slightly off with an axe, anybody who's split logs will know it goes shing and flies off. Okay, it hits the target and then it skims off. So if you're hitting a shield or a helmet or trying to split wood, having the edge wrongly aligned is really bad thing. So edge alignment very important, even in that. And of course, any of you who understand how sort of drag works on an aeroplane, for example, the tail is at the back because that's the bit that trails, or a weather vane, or weathercock as it's sometimes known. The wind blows and the tail obviously goes away from the wind, not necessarily wind so much as inertia in this case. If you swing something which has a blade on one side and not on the other, it will naturally want to swing to the back. It won't want to stay at the front, especially if you're changing direction. Okay, it might be fine if you're just doing one straight line, but if I start to swing here and then I want to take it down to the leg, whoa, that axe, what happens is it goes straight here, and as soon as I change direction, the axe head turns. So to cut a long story short, I really hate cylindrical shafts on any kind of cutting weapon. Okay, Other thing to mention, and I did mention this in a review before and Peter came back with some comments, the wedges at the top. Now, we don't necessarily really know, although a friend of mine has, which I might talk a bit in a future video, we don't know much about how axe shafts were wedged or kept in the socket on early medieval axes. However, apparently there are some finds in Ireland which challenge this, and they actually have organic wedges, which is what I actually guessed previously or suggested was the possible way they did it, in that instead of driving and in fact we have wooden wedges in modern wood splitting axes, but usually you have a wooden wedge and then you have metal wedges as well, often at 90 degrees. But it seems that in early medieval axes there's a good chance that they just simply used antler or horn, or indeed a hardwood, to actually just drive a wedge in the end, and they did with that. And what Peter has done in this, if you can just catch the light of it there we go, you can see a series of what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 very thin metal wedges driven in that direction. Now, I criticised this on the basis that, to me, when I've seen metal wedges inserted in this type of axe, personally, I've always seen them done in line with the blade, for right or wrong. And Peter, completely justified, points out that his impression is that they actually hold for longer if you use more smaller wedges rather than 1 or 2 big wedges, and he prefers to do them in that direction. That's fine, that's a maker's prerogative. I have to say, it doesn't really, to me, it doesn't look very nice. It looks kind of messy, and I think that it's not historical, but I wouldn't criticise for that because I didn't request that the wedging be done historically. However, as always, Peter is a maker, and I'm sure that if you wanted to have something done differently up here, then he could accommodate you. The main headline, really, of the review for Peter Szabo's axes is the heads are lovely. They're, as far as I can tell, really good quality steel, heat treated well, and they take a really good edge and keep a good edge so far as I can see. And he has a really good eye for either replicating historical axe heads or coming up with his own kind of versions of so historically inspired axe heads. And he is fantastic at certain metal working skills. He can do pattern welded edges and stuff like this. He can do decoration in the blade. So he's a very skilled craftsman. Personally, if I were commissioning this axe again, the things that I would request to be done differently are oval shaft, and I would really say, please give me an oval shaft. Or possibly I would just ask for just the head without the shaft, and I would put the shaft on myself, and I might end up, and in fact I probably will end up reshafting this axe because the head's lovely, but I'm not a fan of the shaft at all really. I would, if I was having it shafted, I would request different wedges at the top there. So there we go, guys. Oh, and finally on prices, he does everything from sort of tomahawk size upwards, right the way up to sort of Dane axe things. And the prices really depend on a lot of parameters, whether it's got decoration and how elaborate the shaft might be, how big the axe head is, all of these kind of things. So really the price range seems to be from about 170, 180 euros for something fairly small and basic, upwards. For an axe like this, you'd probably be looking at something like 250 euros, but it all depends on the detail. So as I mentioned, I'll put the link to Peter's Facebook page below, where he's putting up constantly sort of updates with the work that he's doing. And if you're interested in commissioning something from him, or indeed he's got things for sale on his Facebook page, then just get in contact with him and discuss from there. He doesn't have a fixed price list. You just have to pick the things that you want and then talk to him about it. So yeah, so really, I'm really happy with this axe head. It's lovely. It looks right. It looks exactly like the archaeological example I wanted replicated. The thickness is nice. The weight is good. The finish is good. I'm really happy with that axe head. I don't like the axe shaft and I don't like the wedging at the end. So personally, I'll probably, when I have time, haha, like I have so much time, but when I have time, I will at some point do away with this shaft and put my own shaft on with the grain in the right direction, with probably using ash, so a different wood to this, with the grain in the right direction, slightly more flared at the bottom, definitely oval section, and I will wedge it at the top, probably with an antler wedge, which I think is probably fairly historical. So there we go guys, a revised review of Peter Szabo, and notice I pronounce his name correctly now, Peter Szabo's axes. And I do recommend you go and like his Facebook page and have a look at some of his work, because he's got some beautiful stuff there. Cheers guys!
Click subscribe now and also follow us on Facebook.